What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And today, my amazing guest, all the way from Florida, is Dr. Mala. Hello, Dr. Mala. Would
Hi.
you do me a favor and introduce yourself to the gang and please say your entire name so I get it right finally
Sure.
once?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it's Dr. Malasri Chaudhery-Malgeri, and my nickname is Mala, so everyone calls me Dr. Mala.
Easy peasy. I could have done that. No, no, I've tried like for 2 hours trying to get it. So, anyways, Dr. Mala, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to read your bio real quick and then we'll get cooking if that's okay with you.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, we have Dr. Mala. She is an expert in TBI, PTSD, military psychology, marriage and family psychology, rehabilitative therapy, integrative and collaborative program development, industrial organized psychology, and more. Dr. Mala has helped individuals diverse age ranges and backgrounds, including the military, executives, and business professionals, political figures, rural communities, native populations, LGBTQ plus populations, athletes, and couples and families all over the place. Dr. Mala is also a motivational speaker and presenter. So,
Mhm.
welcome, 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 welcome. Now,
Thank you.
as I threatened earlier, I do just have one question for you. I just have one question. I promise I'll shut up. But we're the What If You Could podcast.
Mhm.
So I always ask my guests, hey, Dr. Mala, have you ever had a what if you could moment, or if there's a what if you could thought, or maybe there's still a gosh, what if I could down the road one day do this? Do you have anything like that for us you'd like to share?
Absolutely. I think that's a question that comes across all of our minds at some point or multiple points through our lives. So I love the fact that we're shaping our discussion today around that. My knee-jerk reaction has always been, what if I could help redefine how we understand recovery?
Mm,
Um, Not just as a destination, but as a lifelong relationship that we define and create for ourselves with healing, hope, and self-awareness. Um, I think if I had my way, for sure, I was already kind of going against the norm for the era, that I was brought up in the world of psychology and being a provider in the field, because it wasn't very integrated. It wasn't very multidisciplinary at the time. Multidisciplinary approaches, meaning having multiple, therapeutic modalities to provide to people, was just starting to emerge. But true integration between those therapeutic services was not something that was really done or understood. And anything that was holistically bound was considered very woo woo, So if I had my way, I think 25 plus years ago, I would be, and I was, bringing together what I saw as science, story, and soul, to bridge what we know clinically with what we're feeling on a day-to-day basis. So I think I would say, what if I could create a world where people didn't have to suffer in silence, where access to empathy and education flowed freely across every border? And that in many ways has been part of my mission, as a professional and as a person in the community, whatever community that is. I've always believed that I can, and I also believe that we can together.
yeah. Wow, I love that. Because you hear that a lot
Mm-hmm.
about recovery. I
Mm-hmm.
hear when I get there,
Mm-hmm.
or as
Yeah.
as soon as I get this, once I can stop drinking for 2 weeks, or once,
Yep.
I get one good scan, or once I lose this amount of weight, or whatever it is, once I leave that douchebag, whatever it is, we like to think of recovery as an end to something.
Right.
But it
Right.
really isn't. I mean, recovery is just an ongoing thing, regardless of what it is
Mm-hmm.
you're recovering from, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I've had my own bout also with trauma, unfortunately, that I've experienced across my life. And um, I wonder often, like, if it wasn't something that kept repeating itself throughout my life, my timeline, would I have been also in that mindset of this is a destination, like I just got done with it and now I'm done, and would I have been stuck there? Um, I very quickly learned, that recovery was something that I had to define for myself and embrace every single day. And I'm going to say this with an asterisk by it, but the fact that I had to encounter trauma repeatedly through my timeline reinforced everything that I tried to heal and all the tools that I'd, compiled for myself and my belief system for supporting people who are on a journey to think about it as lifelong, right? So the one benefit, again, I say that wincing, the one benefit of having had these experiences is the fact that it reinforced for me that it's a continual thing. You're always going to have to essentially balance, and learn to navigate and define your navigation system for yourself um, throughout your life, no matter trauma, not no trauma, so yeah.
Did you say science, body, and soul? Or what did I miss there? Is that
I
what you
said
said when
science, story, and soul.
science, story,
Yeah, yeah.
and soul? Why is it science, story, and soul? I totally get the soul part.
Well, there's so many stories that we end up having through our life, like collecting through our lives, right? Like, I think a lot of people also think about recovery as like, what's the one story, right?
Yeah.
It's not just one story always, it's multiple stories and it's little baby stories from the main story, like
Oh.
or chapters, if you will. And for me, science includes the biopsychosocial everything, so I'm thinking when I think science, I'm thinking biological, I'm thinking physiological, I'm thinking spiritual to a degree as well. I'm thinking, social, so science, the personal story, and then the soul, what's going on here. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I love the science story. And, we always hear about that. We're trying to all-encompassing body, mind, and soul type of thing and something like that. So I like that you switched to science, story, and soul because it's really the story
Yeah.
can keep us from recovering, right? I mean, if we keep staying locked in our story, where we own the story, this is our story, it makes it tougher to recover sometimes. How do you talk about holistic? How do you mesh holistic and science?
Oh yeah. So that's again something that I started very early on. And like the backstory with that is um when I was brought up in a home that was very artistically bound. So I always had music. I was classically trained in Indian classical dance forms as well as Indian classical vocal. My dad was an artist. So for an Asian home, we were kind of already breaking the norms because both of my parents were in the arts and literature and, like not the traditional like MD, like situation. They were all doctors, but the PhDs, they were all instructors, but it was kind of like outside of the norm for the community. And I'm so thankful for that because it gave me this beautiful view of the arts and how healing they could be, and of literature and reading and, like reading not just science, but, other things as well. And um, it was, without my even realizing it, a coping mechanism that, I was able to develop and lean into all the time. Um, I unfortunately experienced childhood trauma with a family relative, and um, I honestly wasn't able to process that until much later in my life. Um, and the reason for that was because, again, the community and the stigmas surrounding mental health and even being able to talk about things like that was very difficult. It was a culture for sure of stoicism meant strength. We talk about these things, in amongst our family, and that's it, that kind of a thing. Um, so it started in childhood, and that unfortunately reinforced the arts as a coping mechanism for myself. And then fast forward, and I had several other traumas that occurred in my life. Lots of racism and, unfortunately, gender-based biases that I confronted pretty headstrong throughout my upbringing and through school. And then realized really quickly, again, like, what am I leaning on? My way of expressing was through dance, was through song, was through yoga. So then I went and I, got my education, and, was getting my master's, and had been in an environment where, luckily, my program for school was very eclectic. So they reinforced the idea of utilizing different therapeutic modalities, not just being centered in one, to be able to speak to the people that we're working with. And again, that was kind of new for the time, for the era that I was brought up in psychology. And so then I was like, well, I know that this is, other things have been healing for me, not just therapeutic modalities, but other things have been healing for me. What if, we mix these things together? And it just so happened I was in a very toxic and abusive relationship, which came with its own, buckets of shame and processing that I needed to go through. And when I finally was able to cut myself off from that relationship, I put myself through essentially my own therapeutic program, which integrated therapy and yoga and dance and martial arts and meditation, with academia and work, and just really diversifying every category of life that I call on my wheel of life, right? There's so many different categories. I was really diversifying all of those pieces of the pie, all of those sections of the wheel, and I found myself again, and I connected with myself. And so, first job out of my master's, I was leading an adolescent program, and my my pitch on the table was, let's include some of these other modalities that are not necessarily therapeutic. They weren't considered therapeutic at the time. Let's integrate the different disciplines together and cross collaborate sessions so that we can really diversify our offerings, and, also diversify the way a person can heal. And there's a lot of resistance. I was met with so much resistance. It was very frustrating. But of course, I was the newbie, I was the new person on the team, that kind of thing. So it's okay. It was considered woo-woo at the time, but I pushed it, and we saw the efficacy. And then I went to a place where we did that even more. And that became very quickly my passion, was program development, integrating the holistic, what we consider holistic, with the evidence-based. And now, fortunately, that is part of the norm, in recovery programs. It's hard to throw a stone and not find a place that will offer, a whole plethora of options to heal, which I'm so thankful for. I do think that integrate. True integration is still something that we're refining, and we need to continue to refine, and that's okay. We're doing it, like, but yeah, I keep pushing it. I keep singing that song. Yeah.
When you use the term holistic,
Hmm.
what do you consider holistic in the type of work that you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. I mean, holistic to me is anything that is looking at the person from the whole person perspective. So, for me, it's again, mind, body, spirit, soul, story, um, and the interconnectedness of all of those different components, including environment as well. That's not one I should ignore. Um, so we're looking at the person, we're treating the person, not just the symptoms, not just the problems, is how I define it.
When you're talking about recovery,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so you've personally been through a lot of trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're working with people to get them through on different levels through that. Um, how do you protect yourself?
Oh,
When you're
yeah.
dealing with people, how are you keeping that away from going back down rabbit holes?
100%. Yeah, I mean, that's a common thing that we talk about, so now I do a lot more coaching and consulting than I do. And I also am the chief clinical officer at recovery.com, which we'll get into later on.
Mhm.
But I consult a lot with people. And one of the things, even as an educator, so I was also a professor at a beautiful university in Alaska. Um, our part of our programming and our education that we provide to students and incoming new providers in the mental health space is how to create the boundaries, between what a person is putting out there and what we are hearing and how we're consuming that. So I have to say 100%, that I'm thankful to my mentors and my schooling. I had beautiful mentors. They're very close to my heart. And I'm grateful for them every day because they taught me and arguably us very well how to healthily, appropriately compartmentalize, and not consume. Um, if I were to consume every single story that I've, met, every single journey that I've met, I would not be doing well right now, for sure. So and yeah, with especially the amount that I've heard, yeah.
Yeah. And because let's face it, I mean, not every therapist who goes into psychology or therapy or working with all the different modalities that you work with,
Yeah.
not everyone has been a trauma victim themselves, right? I mean,
No.
they're like, oh, I'm kind of interested in psychology. I'll become a psychologist, help people in different modalities and stuff like that. But I mean, you've been there,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
you can see things from a whole different perspective maybe than someone who
Mhm.
hasn't been through that type of trauma.
There's definitely benefit, like, I mean, in terms of knowing and having experienced different things, whether it's trauma or depression or like being on the field in the military, experience definitely can add to your repertoire. Um, I will say though, it's not mandatory. You can still
Yeah.
provide support as a provider without having had that experience. And oftentimes that can come in handy, it is because you as the provider can put yourself in a position of learning the other person and learning from that person and learning specific to their story, Um, but going back to what you're saying in terms of, how not to be triggered, is it common for people, for providers who, might be in certain situations and then be caught off guard? Absolutely, absolutely. And we all want to remember that we're human,
Yeah.
like, that's the other thing that I really stand behind and have focused a lot of my work on is being a support to other providers who are also healing, because in our space, and especially from, I would say, my generation and older generations as well that came before me, again, it was this mindset of there's no space to process your own stuff. You've got to just provide and provide, 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 provide. Again, I'm thankful that I've had the experiences that I've had, but I also had mentors who were absolutely wonderful and revolutionary that reinforced for me that sense of debriefing, and the debriefing because you're feeling and the feeling is completely natural is necessary, right?
Yeah.
So yes, so to answer your question, yes, can we feel triggered? Absolutely. What do you do with it? You got to work through it. If it happens, you do need to debrief. You lean into the people who are your mentors, your supervisors, what have you, and your peers, and talk it through. Um, we're all human, and we all
Yeah.
need to know that in order to be able to provide, we need to take care of ourselves. So yeah, now to that end, I'm going to say this again, thankful to my education and my teachers for giving me the tools to be able to really navigate that well. And thankfully, because that was so wonderful, wonderfully done, I've been okay. I've been fine. That doesn't really happen often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to I want to go back to the stories of the science, story, and soul. I mean, I like that. I like those three. Um, because kind of like we touched on a little bit. I mean, the story is can be
Mhm.
so all encompassing. It can be so empowering. I mean, it could really keep us locked in some place that's just not healthy. And I'd imagine, because of your personal story, um, you may be a little more ginger with people who kind of have a rough story and aren't easily finding their way to giving it up. But you really have to, right? I mean, don't you at some point have to address that story and just say, it's just, I'm not that story anymore. I mean, because we love our story.
Yeah, I think it's easy for people to get to a place where they identify themselves with their story only, and that can be problematic. We want to remember that the story is one of many through our lives, right? Our life is a story with many chapters, is one way of, thinking about it for sure. Or our life is a bookshelf with many, many individual stories, take your pick. The point is it's not just one, there's a lot of nuances to it. Um, I always say that it's important to acknowledge all of your stories, whatever end up, like one by one, collectively, whatever. Acknowledgement is key. But then you need to think about, how that story is playing into your day to day, if it is holding you back, if it's something that you're utilizing as a foundation to be able to grow off of. And to really create, which is my second step of an action plan, and the action plan is to be able to answer to yourself with regards to all the things that you want to do across those various pieces of the pie, or, little areas of the wheel of your life, to find true synergy, you know, and define what synergy means to you, and how it can really create a lifelong story that is healing for you.
Yeah, we have different chapters to our life, right? Just
Yeah.
like you're saying that book. I mean, this does not have to be your last chapter. And
No.
you can turn the page on that really shitty chapter and go to the next chapter. You don't have to keep rereading the same chapter in your book, and I love that wheel of life thing. I mean, I've used that a lot for myself and for the people I've worked with and stuff like that. I just think it's great. And it doesn't have to be, finance, money,
Yeah.
relationship, health, whatever. You can put whatever you want. You can
Whatever
make
you
those
want.
spokes anything, right?
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
try to make your wheel. No one's wheel is going to ever roll perfectly. It's just not a possibility. But by choosing what you want to put in there to say, all right, well, this part of my life, whatever, I'd like to roll smoothly and not go ka-clump, 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 right? So I want to work on that wheel. But when you're working for folks, so like who do you norm? I mean, is there like a type of client that you work with most, or is there something that you seek out, specialize in? What is the type of person that you work with the most?
I mean, typically, yeah, again, when that was more prominent for me, my client, I didn't have a specific type. I was very diverse. I've had different chapters of my life where I focused on different populations. So early on and coming right out of grad school, I was really focused in on the TBI population, so traumatic brain injury population, and found my passion and love for rehabilitation there, and looking at what rehabilitation and recovery looked like to that population. That then took me to a lot of other more broad approaches for rehabilitation. So cardiovascular, other neurological, issues and patients and things like that. So I diversified rehab essentially in my experience with rehab. Simultaneous to that, I was working with a lot of the sports population, so athletes, and also high up officials, government officials, individuals who were in stress and how they defined stress. And that kind of took me to my passion for holistic approaches, but like naturopathic approaches as well, and stress management specifically. So again, kept diversifying the population of people that I was
Yeah.
working with. And then I was so lucky to be able to, and while I was doing that, not just TBI or athletes or whatever, but like a cross section of minority and marginalized communities as well. Being able to work with them was something that I did. Then I had this beautiful opportunity to go to Alaska and work with the military. So I focused quite heavily on military and, TBI, of course, like it overlaps. So military psychology was a big thing. Pain management, came with that as well. So there's a lot that I was able to expose myself to. And I've always, while I was treating, and doing one-on-one or groups or working with clinics, I was always educating as well. So I always had my foot in the door as a professor at some university or another. And I had the opportunity to be the head of a department, head of the counseling department, and in Alaska at a very beautiful university. And the most beautiful thing that happened with that was we were able to work with rural and indigenous populations and creating programming for them, outreach for being able to get education, and even something as simple as like mental health first aid accessible for those communities was a big part of what we were focusing on. And that was at a time that was pre-COVID, when, virtual was not really a thing, but it was always a thing for me. I actually started to do virtual services and education in 2004. So I was at it for a while. And as I was integrating it into the work that I was doing, we ended up shifting to New York, and then COVID hit and everyone was in a tizzy and in a panic. And I was like, nope, I got this. We got this. I know how to make this work. This is easy. We can do it. We don't need to stress. So I was able to diversify and focus on a lot of different things as a result of these experiences. So there have been chapters in my life where the focus has been more prominent in, certain communities, but I've always had, again, personal mission of mine to remain diverse in, my offerings as well as my outreach and my advocacy, so that I can stay kind of like, up to date with what's going on with the world.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy. I mean, that's a pretty wide range. I mean, but in reality, I mean, it's basically whether it's an athlete who just wants to, they're worried about they're losing their edge. I mean, athletes are just paranoid about losing their edge, just like a celebrity is paranoid about losing some, roles or their looks, and top business people, CEOs are paranoid about, getting left behind by another company or innovation
Yeah.
taking them out. So I mean, really, they all are very similar in the fact that we all have those type of stresses, or we all have those sorts of
Yeah.
vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah, yeah, and a variety of different vulnerabilities. For a lot of the athletes, I have a little bit of an in on the martial arts community because my husband is a very well-known instructor and coach, and is himself very proficient. I'm not saying this because I'm married to him, but he has like the double equivalent of a PhD in martial arts, and he's been black belted in over 16 different forms. So he is magnificent. I'd be saying this if I wasn't married to him. But he is phenomenal. And what was wonderful is, and that kind of like the intersection of when I met him and the athletes that I was working with, but I love watching him. I'm going to say this. I love watching him. A lot of what he does is coach individuals who are in MMA, and they're going into the cage to fight. They're going into the octagon, and one of my favorite moments with him, even when he trains me, is when he gloves you. He's putting the gloves on or he's wrapping your hands, because to me, that's the therapy session. Like, so it was beautiful to be able to have insight into his approach and what, the athletic and sports psychology from his perspective, not just from, my perspective and my training. And it's just beautiful. So like a lot of the times, all that to say that the analogy that we use is, you walk into the entrance of the octagon and you're like, why the bleep am I doing this? you know,
I
and
don't know.
then you're just like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And so that going through that and having the narrative, to kind of work through for that is also part of the game. But it's so representative. It's such a great metaphor for almost every other life event, so executive stress is a real thing. That's another part. Again, I mentioned provider work that I like to do. I work with executives as well and businesses to help them with their mentality and just like evening the playing field. And one of the things that I've seen, it's that question, like people will get to the position that they want to. They're now in an executive spot and they're sitting there and they're going, what did I sign up for? Wait, what? you know,
Yeah.
it's that at the gate of the octagon moment, like in that door.
Yeah. I've been involved in coaching for a long time. I'm a real estate broker by trade. I do this because I love meeting interesting people like you, but just in real estate training and stuff, no matter how successful someone is, or like, can I do this again? Can I do
Yeah.
this again? Is
Yeah.
is is my luck gonna run out or whatever? But on a less violent scale of coaching like your husband, you watch golfers, and you see the caddy. It's like a caddy's almost an on-course
100%.
therapist, right? With this
Oh, yeah.
guy, he's like the dude's greatest. These are the greatest golfers in the world, and they just hit it in the tree or they hit it in a lake, and the caddy's got to kind of pull him up and go, "Hey, man."
Yeah.
I mean, so we're
Yeah.
always getting that sort of coaching. I mean, I was coaching my kids, whether they knew it or not, when they were little tiny. I mean, we're
Yeah.
always either being coached or we're coaching, right?
100%. I mean, that's life. I'm going to reference, you mentioned the caddy. One of my favorite movies is The Legend of Bagger Vance.
Yeah.
I love because it's the interplay,
Will Smith and
just the
yeah,
interplay between the two of them and the coaching that goes on. I mean, it is just so moving.
yeah.
And you're right. You're absolutely right. I love what you
Well, I
said.
was, I was just watching him. Even I play golf with my son as often as I can,
Mhm.
and I just love playing golf with him. But his mind is a disaster on the golf course because he actually cares. And
Yeah.
I golf barefoot. I don't even wear shoes, and I don't keep score. I could care less. I'm out there because they're
Yeah.
so beautiful, and I just love being there and being with him. But so I mean, we'll just do that.
Mhm.
He'll when his mind's getting a little squirrely, it's like on the next hole. I'm like, "Do you like that club?"
Yeah.
I don't know. I go, no, no. Do you like that club? He's like, I
Yeah.
love this club. I love this club. I'm like, yeah, you love that club, fucker. Let's go, And then boom, just hits a
Yeah.
sweet spot. But sometimes you just gotta get that head right a little bit,
Yeah. 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 For sure. For sure.
So
Absolutely.
much
I
fun.
love that. I love that.
So, how did you end up in Alaska working with the
Oh,
military?
well, haha, funny story. The first time I went to Alaska was with my parents on vacation. Absolutely loved it. So then when I met my husband and he proposed and we were planning all the things, came to the honeymoon discussion. I said, honey, we could either go to Alaska, but I've been there, but I think you'd love it. Or do you want to go somewhere like Ireland or Scotland? Because that's also on our bucket list, right? And he's like, let's do Alaska. So we went to Alaska and we were walking around, and of course, new vision because I'm married, I'm older, and we were just walking around one of the towns and we're like, we could totally live here. Like it is just absolutely serene and beautiful. And I think that was when we first fell in love with it together. I was already in love with it, but as a tourist, and then when I had these new, this new view on, it was really interesting to think about life beyond what we had known. And, part of what my husband and I decided we wanted to do was really be able to live our lives, not just in one location necessarily, that we could be anywhere and that could be home, because what really defines home for us is us and our family.
Yeah.
So I just randomly started to apply for jobs, and it happened. I got called back, but I remember that day like it was yesterday when I got called by the department, and I spoke with the head of the department at the time, and she was just saying all the things that I needed to hear and wanted to hear. And it was like checking all the boxes. It was, doing one-on-one, doing groups, program development, doing things from ground up, like really being an innovator, and being a part of a great and beautiful team and serving a population that I'm very passionate about. And I was passionate about, I had a few military members before then as well, but being able to be of service to them, meant the world to me. So I was like, yes. Yeah. I came down to my
That's
husband
awesome.
after the interview and I was like, honey, this just happened. And he's like, I guess we're moving,
It's meant to be. And
yeah.
that's such an awesome gift, that you're giving these folks because we're a military family. And I'll
Mm,
tell you, it's tough being a military family.
yes.
And also, it's a really tough. You hear you put these men and women into brutal situations, and then
Mhm.
you just expect them to be okay,
Yeah.
but they're not even allowed to not be okay.
Nope.
And so the folks who need the most help are the folks who refuse to go get help because they're trained to not ask
Yeah.
for help.
Yep.
So it's just such a brutal situation, and thankfully it's changing.
Yes.
Obviously folks like you, but it's tough on the military, right? I mean, that's just not a fair spot we put them in.
So you know how I said to you, like, I was brought up in an era where providers, and this is still happening, like providers were trained to just provide, provide, provide. There's alignment there, which is also why that community speaks to me, like, and I wanted to be of service, is it's always return to duty, return to duty. So like, we're trying to just patch up and get you back out, so it was very hard. It still is very hard, for people to even advocate to be able to get care, because the stigmas that surround it as a result of what that could mean. Um, to be of service is what basically jimble jambles that whole narrative up. Um, yeah, I mean, pain management was considered take a Motrin, drink some water, get back to it. Um, let alone being able to address mental health and understand the idea of everything being interconnected, that thankfully now is getting a little bit better. But I would say, when I was in it, very deeply, it wasn't, which is why we were program developing and advocating for that change.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, and again, whoever has been of service, if it was you, were to thank you for your service, and for everything, because it's just a monumental load, that everyone carries.
It's my son and a number of family members and so on and so forth. It's pretty tough. But PTSD is tough,
Yes.
but and I think that we're in a really weird space with mental health in
Yes,
the
we are.
entire freaking country right now. I mean, it's like our entire country is going through a mental health episode right now at the same time. It's the
Yes.
most bizarre our thing of what we're allowing to happen to ourselves, how we're
Mhm.
being manipulated, but also just the true pain that a lot of people are going through right now. It's bizarre what's happening.
I I'm gonna say this too. Like I really have been thankful for the progress we've made as a country through the years, but now with everything that's been going on, I am seeing a regression, and that fear is returning again to be able to speak and identify, and rightly so. So, like, to even say I need help is scary for so many. So unfortunately, I am seeing that regression. And one of the things also that I always say is that, the energy of the world, it's a real thing, and it does trickle across the globe, right? So, the air that I'm breathing is the air that you're breathing, or vice versa. You're in Pacific Coast, so the air that you're breathing is going to be the air that I'm breathing eventually,
Exactly.
right? Um, and so I definitely do believe that we're sharing energies, and I've seen this come up in themes, so often. So one of the other things that I've always done from a social media perspective is I've never been on social media to just be on social media. I always get on social media when there are themes that are emerging that I'm hearing everybody talk about and be stressed about, and those are what I'm addressing, right? So I get called, I listen to people, and then I get called to, and that's when I post something. So I never follow the rules, like I'm horrible with that. But, like I'm driven by the people and what they're saying, so I see these themes that emerge. And like I said, one of the themes that I'm seeing again is that fear, and that fear is reinforcing the stigma, and the stigma is reinforcing the sense of stress and anxiety, and everything that runs comorbid to that. And it's not a good situation, unfortunately.
Why why do you think it's happening and where do you think it's coming from?
Oh Lord. Well,
Might as well
I
go there. I mean,
I know.
as we if we don't address it, it could be the elephant in the room, but I mean, unless we address it and more people talk about what
Yeah,
they think is the, and, instead of just screaming at each other and just, throwing out weird crap. I mean, if we all just go, look, we all kind of agree that here's something, maybe
yeah.
we can all address it.
There's a lot. Okay, so I'm just gonna say politics is not helping, at
Wait a
all.
minute, I'm shocked.
Surprise, surprise. Um, Politics is not helping. Wherever you stand, I mean, technically on both sides, there's stress. You know, or on all the sides. Let's just say whatever. It's not just two. Like wherever you stand, there's stress. Um, my biggest concern, this is going to be so vague, so I apologize for this, but like my biggest concern is that people will not feel like they can speak up, and that we can hold space for each other. Our ability as humans to be empathic and hold space for each other, to be able to say, yes, this is what I believe, and this is what, so and so believes, but we're just going to come together, and we're going to try to find some middle ground where there's an intersection, like in a beautiful, quiet, peaceful way. That's my wish for the world. you know?
That would be my what if you could, but it's just
Yeah.
not gonna. I mean, the challenge is that if I have an opinion about what's best for my health,
Yeah.
and I say, I believe that for myself, this is the best call for
Mhm.
myself,
Mhm.
health-wise, because I believe this.
Mhm.
And for that, not only get my ass kicked, but
Yeah.
I get completely annihilated and ostracized and
Yeah.
fired and
Yeah.
on and on and on. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. All I did was express what I think is best for my health and my
You.
family's
Yeah.
health. Now,
Yeah.
I believe I have the right to do that. Now, if you don't agree with my right to do that, then it would make sense that you go, dude, I don't agree with you, and then we move on and have coffee or go play pool.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I'm just using that example, but I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately, it seems layer after layer after layer of this that you, based on what you said so graciously and gracefully and vaguely. to be safe
Yeah.
is the truth. You know, it seems that it's very challenging to even just express an opinion if it seems to go against what
Yeah.
the mainstream media wants or the powers that be want or whatever. And that's a super unhealthy place to be.
Right. And choose your mainstream media, right? Because technically each camp has their own mainstream, right? So, so unfortunately it's become, and this is the thing, we're splitting.
Yes, we're split.
We're splitting and we're split. Yeah. I mean, so I was actually having a conversation earlier about this with a beloved coworker of mine, and we're talking about because of all of this that's happening, there is this pull and need for a sense of community and, being able to have space that's just safe for community to come together, however we're defining that those communities. And I guess that's also part of a lot of what I advocate for is just being able to hold space. I don't care what's going on, like I want to make sure that everybody is healing and okay and that we can talk about these things equitably. I know that's a big wish, but
That's a big wish. But
yeah,
again, you know, you even talk about you like to work with or you do work with the LGBTQ plus community. Now,
yes. Yeah.
when I grew up,
Mhm.
I live in a huge gay area. I mean, besides San Francisco, Palm Springs is probably number
Yeah.
two on the west coast of the gay community. I mean, you go to East Coast, you got Provincetown, and you got you know. But we just been we never. I just grew up. It's like, dude, I don't care what you're doing. I could care less. I love you. You're my bud, you know, and just that's how
Yeah.
we've always been here. We've got a really solid community.
Mhm.
Um, and even that's starting to splinter here, which is just so bizarre. It's like, wait a minute, what? Why are these are the same dudes and gals I've known for 50 years. What are
Wow.
you so pissed off about? Why are you mad at me? I've
Mhm.
never, I love you. I could care less. We're the same dudes,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
just like dudes, all right? And I
Yeah.
like to, but
Exactly.
we've always been friends. Why now do you hate me? What did I do wrong? I'm not any different than I was.
Mhm.
And I understand a lot of the LGBTQ community is attacked and under attack,
Yep.
but I don't know. I'm going to use a term that I'd probably get hammered for, but I don't care. A lot of my old school gay friends
Mhm.
are friends with me, and a
Mhm.
lot of the younger, newer gay community are kind of like mad at me, and I'm like, well, I don't understand.
Why?
It's weird
Yeah,
to
what's
me.
going on? I honestly, this is what I'm going to come back to. It's all driven by fear, right? So that type of like without even, and I don't know the people that you're talking about, obviously. So like what what I'm seeing is that when there's fear that builds anger and angst, and then obviously comes with that defense mechanisms where then it's easy to generalize. And when somebody doesn't feel safe, what are they going to do? They're just going to automatically disconnect,
Lash out.
right, lash out, disconnect from maybe what would have been okay, and now it's just like anybody who falls into this category, you're not in my box, like without knowing somebody, right? So I it's so sad to see this happening because this is again the splitting that we're talking about that is in my mind it's not necessary, but I understand why people feel like they think it is because it's a protective measure. One of the things that I just try to focus on is I don't have any control over the other person, but I do have control over myself and the energy, again, going back to energy, the energy that I put out there. And all I can do is continue to sing my song and try to be a neutral, safe space for whoever needs to come and talk and, like be there, debrief, whatever, whether you're a friend, whether you're a family member, whether you're a community member, whatever. I just want to hold space, and provide spaces that do that and reinforce healing and recovery, you know, because we're all recovering from something, you know?
And that's kind of why I do this, because I invite everybody on.
Mhm.
I want, I don't care if you're right side, left side, gay, straight. I don't care what, how, when. If you have a story that will help people, I want to talk to you about it,
Which,
because
yeah,
that's what it's
love
about.
that.
It's just trying to help people and knock down these barriers and stuff. So, where do
Mhm.
you see mental health going? I mean, you obviously, we walked through all the different layers and
Yeah.
levels and stuff that you've done. Where do you see mental health going in this country?
That's a great question. Um, I think I think there's going to be a whole bunch of us who are going to remain advocates and again, I'm not the only one who's singing this song, which I'm so thankful for. With everything that's happening, I think there's again kind of like that emergence of the people who are fearful, who are wanting to kind of like again become quiet because they're afraid. And then there's also simultaneous to that an emergence of those who are advocates and wanting to be able to, fight for fill in the blank, right? My hope is that despite the splitting, we will come back to a place where we're not siloed again, and that we will be able to run with being more integrative and inclusive and accessible. It's going to come back to, I think, looking at the individuals, and the person, looking at one person at a time holistically, and then in so doing, be able to serve the collective. I think we're going to have to, there's going to be a lot of us who are going to have to do that. And I'm thankful, like, again, I mentioned the company that I'm with right now, which is recovery.com. It's an amazing resource. I wish I had this tool 25 years ago when I first started, because the whole mission is to connect people to care. It's to provide support to family members and remove the barriers to care as much as we can. And so what I do there as chief clinical officer is really reinforce the concept of recovery literacy. And in so doing, try to create unbiased resources and tools to be able to remove those barriers to being able to find care and support when needed, whether you're a person seeking care yourself or a family member, a loved one. And we're seeking to just really expand all of that. It's free for everyone to go on there and use. You can get education, you can find treatment. There's a whole bunch of different things.
Well, I want to jump back into that real quick, but first, you know, we all need, or I believe many of us can use a tweak now and then, a vent now and then, a
Oh, yeah.
course correction now and then. I think everyone, if they're honest with themselves, say, I don't need to do this alone. I don't need to suffer in silence. I don't want to talk to my wife about it, my kids about it, my coworkers about it. Everyone has a little something that they could use, and that's why coaching is so crucial.
Oh,
Michael
yeah.
Jordan is one of the biggest advocates for coaching. He's probably one of the greatest athletes in the history of the world. So I do want to touch on that again, but I lied earlier, and you probably knew I was a liar because you're a psychologist and you could tell I'm a liar. I did lie earlier. I said I only had one question, but I really have two questions.
Of course, of course.
I never give up the second one. I always give you the first one, but I never give the second. So my last question is before we sign off and go and find out more about your program. But if there was a thought that Dr. Mala had, or uh, a saying, a thought, a wish, if there's something that meant something very deeply to you
Yeah.
that you'd like to share with us before we tootle out of here, what would that thought be if you have one you'd like to share?
Recovery is possible.
Mhm.
Um, and what we need to do is build systems that honor wholeness, foster belonging, and also cherish what I said earlier, which was the story, the soul, and the science behind it all. Understanding that recovery is a lifelong language of resilience that we're developing and cultivating for ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. And I know, I mean, you've shared it a lot, and that's kind of why I didn't go into it. I mean, but you've had a really tough go. I mean, you had a pretty traumatic upbringing and a lot of crazy shit that happened to you that you fought through, and now you're helping others and through the trauma and recovery. And I just give you tons of credit for that because not everybody makes it out of that type of situation. But so tell me again about the program you're talking about. I kind of missed what the name was. How do we find it? What are you involved with? What are you doing right now? Where can people find you and get more involved with Dr. Mala?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. And I just wanted to say that my upbringing was beautiful. I love my parents and my sister and my family, my most immediate family. What was difficult were the traumas for sure, and just the stigma surrounding that. So I am thankful, and thank you for honoring that, on the show, and for giving me the space to be able to share that with people. To that, I would say, recovery is always possible. It's just a matter of finding your path. And I'm so thankful that we now have multiple ways of being able to provide support for people who are trying to find and get on their recovery journey, or even just like maintain it. So what I'm doing right now. So I'm the chief clinical officer at recovery.com, and my work there is to really stand behind and reinforce the concept of what I call recovery literacy, so that we are empowered through education and information that is unbiased so that we can make the choices that we need to find treatment, to connect to care, to understand what we're going through on this journey. So that's the work that I do there. Recovery.com, beautiful source, free for everyone to utilize so that you can get all of those things, connect to treatment, get the education, figure out what that journey needs to look like for you. I'm also the founder of the Synergy Center, and that is a beautiful center that provides holistic services to individuals of all ages and all backgrounds, coaching, wellness, holistic services, and more. And it's all virtual.
Awesome. And I've been on your site. You've got all sorts of awesome stuff on your website. I mean, even day planners,
Yes.
pages for a day planner, which I was like, I got journals and day planners everywhere, and I'm still completely lost. So what's your actual website?
Yeah, so drmala.net is where you can find me. My social handles are also at the official Dr. Mala. So you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Awesome. And Facebook.
And Facebook, yes.
And Dr. Mala on Facebook. 'Cause I did find you on Facebook. I
Yeah.
think I followed you, a friend that you said. So that's
Oh,
awesome. So guys, recovery.com, um, synergy.com. You got to find Dr. Mala on her sites. Got a lot of great resources there. I'm going to look into that recovery.com, and you're doing so much, kiddo, and probably you have time to do all this stuff because your husband will beat the crap out of anybody who bugs you, so you don't
we
you don't have to
always
worry
say,
about being bothered.
we always say in martial arts, we always try to talk it through first. And if that doesn't work, then we walk away. And then only as a last resort do we utilize any type of anything physical. But
Yeah.
I would say I'm grateful to him. I'm grateful to my 4 kids because, everything that we do is as a family. So even everything that I do, whoever I'm working with, whatever projects I'm working on, I truly see it as a family effort because without them, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing and advocate for what I'm advocating for.
That's awesome. And I'll tell you what, we desperately need you. We need recovery.com. We need you to help all of our communities, LGBTQ plus community, our traumatic brain injury people, our soldiers, men and women in uniform. So we're really grateful for all that you're doing,
Thank you.
and for your husband and for your amazing 4 children. And I
Mhm.
really appreciate you coming on, Dr.
Thank
Mall. It's been
you. Thank
wonderful.
you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having me. It's been a beautiful conversation.
Cool biz, everybody. So look for Dr. Mala. You'll find her all over the place. Just go for the at Dr. Mala. Go to recovery.com, go to synergy.com, go to Dr. Mala's website, find her, get all her free resources, and just connect with her because she's an awesome soul. You can already tell. So thank you guys. See you next time on the What If You Could podcast. Later, Gators. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.